subtle than is publicly recognized. As I understand it, you don't deny that there is climate change happening in the world and that things like sea level rise and warming are occurring and that they're related to the combustion of fossil fuels, which has drastically increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Senator. I enjoyed our dialogue about that and future dialogues about that. But yeah, I've been outspoken about this for probably at least 20 years. Mostly from the combustion of hydrocarbons to enable our modern worlds, we've increased atmospheric CO2 concentration by 50%.
And that has affected.
Absorbs infrared radiation, makes it harder for the Earth to shed heat.
But as I understand, your position is, as I say, more subtle. You see a tension between diminishing our reliance on fossil fuels and powering those 6 million people who don't have adequate energy sources today. That's the kind of balance that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, well stated, Senator. That is my view. Energy is critical to human lives. Climate change is a global challenge that we need to solve, and the trade-offs between those two are the decisions politicians make, and they're the decisions that'll impact the future of our world and the quality of life.
Those trade-offs are critically important. I think there are two observations. One is you've said there's no energy transition. You're a walking energy transition. What you did in your work in shale was an energy revolution in this country that transitioned us in many ways toward natural gas. So there is possible transition. It can happen either slowly or probably faster. Fusion, SMRs, battery storage, all of those technologies. And I note that your company wasn't exclusively oil and gas, but it also has investments in battery technology, in nuclear SMRs. So you do believe that we do need to diminish where we can the emission intensity of our manufacture of energy.
Absolutely, Senator. You're bringing me back to the great dialogue we had about energy, about climate change, about trade-offs, and I appreciate very much your comments today. I am for improving all energy technologies that can better human lives and reduce emissions. They go together.
I would add one note, however, and I understand the tension, and I think that's a reasonable. I remember saying years ago we can't tell the Indian nation that they can't have air conditioning because we don't want them to be using energy. The thing that has to be considered, though, is what if you're wrong? What if we're wrong and something really drastic happens? My concern that isn't discussed very much is a climate effect on the Atlantic currents. If something happened to the Gulf Stream, Britain, Scandinavia would be uninhabitable. So I think we need to bear in mind that it's not as easy as saying we're going to help the third world and we're going to keep burning fossil fuels. There is a significant risk that we have to have in our calculation. Would you agree?
Senator, I agree with that comment as well. You know, in my writings on climate change, what I record a lot and talk about is what we do know, which is the past up to today. Predictions are hard, particularly about the future. And so, I think we need to be humble about that. We don't know what's coming in the future. But advancement of energy technologies that grow the amount of energy we have, the cost, drive down the cost, the quality, and lower emissions, those are all wins in all scenarios.
And I'm hoping that 10 years from now, we'll look back on this discussion as rather quaint because of technology will have solved the problem. We're all working in that direction. A couple of very quick questions. The Department of Energy has a role in approving LNG export terminals. It's supposed to determine the public interest. And I think Senator Hirono asked this, but I want to confirm that your office, your department, will consider the effect on domestic natural gas prices of expanded LNG export capacity.
Absolutely true, Senator. Nothing is more important than the supply, the affordability, and the access to energy to Americans in America. So absolutely, that's a critical factor in that determination.
And one other question a couple of others I want to underline. Improving the energy structure of this country includes improved transmission. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's one of our major bottlenecks today.
And one of the things I hope you will continue research on is what are called GETs, grid enhancing technologies, which are you don't have to build a whole new tower. You can reconductor. There are technologies to improve the throughput of our grid. That, I think, is a direction we should move in. I commend the research on that to your department.
Thank you, and I agree with that comment as well, Senator. Actually, it was a dinner discussion last night.
Well, I appreciate your testimony here today and look forward to working with you. This is a critical area. You bring a unique perspective and breadth of knowledge, and I appreciate your willingness to take on this challenge. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Daines.
Chris, good to have you here. I get the best view here to see your family, see Liz, and had a grandbaby there for a while.
So I tend to approach energy with 4 goals, and one of the primary ones is affordability. Reliability is always non-negotiable. That's critical. And to the extent our policies can make them both abundant and clean, those are things that are incredibly important to my constituents. And we've heard a lot about cost today, and I know you and I talked a lot about affordability when you visited me in my office. And so I pulled up the latest cost data for wholesale generation costs in cents per kilowatt hour from Lazard. Would you consider Lazard data to be fairly reliable? I mean,
Well, Lazard is Senators.
They were the easiest to pull up, but
They're the most famous for publishing statistics on levelized cost of energy.
no subsidies involved, levelized.
Levelized misses the boat on electricity generation because it treats it like, would you take an Uber that was 10% cheaper in cost if you didn't know when the Uber was going to show up and where it was going to drop you off?
So one of the reasons why I raise this is because in New Mexico, I think we have been able to do both of those things at the same time. So we've pursued both affordability, actually I should say all 3 things, affordability, reliability, but also clean. And I know in 2023, there was a statement that you made that said, wind and solar energy will, quote, likely never leave single digits, I guess as a percent of total energy. And I know you understand the difference between the grid and transportation and heat energy that we use in our total energy balance. But when it comes to the grid in New Mexico, in just my utility, which we talked a little bit about in my office, they now produce 58% of their generation from carbon-free renewables and nuclear being the smallest of that at about 7%, wind and solar being 35%, and wind being 15% of their kilowatt hours. So that means that when you combine that with storage resources, which are primarily getting charged by clean excess renewables, that their penetration rates are now, well into the 60s, even the low 70s. How do, when Chris Wright says these resources will likely never leave single digits, it's one thing, but if the Secretary of Energy says that, I think people will get the impression, get a different impression. So how do you square those 2 very different data sets?
Thank you, Senator. And I appreciate the question. I appreciate our shared interest in affordable, reliable, secure energy, and I think New Mexico's done some great things there. Globally, which is what I talk about mostly in that report, in 2023, the last year we have full data, wind, solar, and batteries were 2.6% of global primary energy. In the U.S., they're a little more than 3%, but not wildly higher than the global. Electricity only delivers 20% of global primary energy. So getting to 50% in electricity, which would be an incredibly high penetration, that would be double digits. But where most of the energy is consumed in the world today, and where it's growing the fastest, is in South Asia, Southeast Asia, Northern Africa, and through mostly South Asia and Southeast Asia. These are countries with very poor wind resources and actually not very good solar resources. India's got some dry places and some deserts and good resources, but Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, if you go to the places where energy growth is rising the fastest, they don't have great energy, they don't have great wind and solar resources.
That was the context of your statement in
Global energy.
Because I want to make sure that we understand, what we as a country are accomplishing. And if you just look back at the last year's worth of data, the first 11 months of 2024, and you look at new generation, the vast majority of that, and I don't have the figure in front of me, but it came out in the last couple of weeks, the vast, vast majority of that is all clean energy. And so if we can take some of these lessons from what we've been able to accomplish as a world leader in energy and use them to help people in the world have access to the abundance that you talk about, I just think it's important to understand the rate of change in some of these systems is not linear. And so we're seeing, like, for example, last year in the U.S., the vast majority of that generation on the electric grid being clean.
I agree, Senator. Thank you, and I appreciate your passion for numbers and energy as well. Thank you for the good comments.
We need more data, guys.
Senator Murkowski.
And thank you, Mr. Wright, for being here. As we consider our energy future, we have so many challenges to deal with. Energy prices, energy poverty, as you've written about. Obviously, climate change is such a big one. As Secretary, do you think there's the possibility that the Department of Energy could finally begin to build a plan, a comprehensive plan on how we deal with the energy future, but also really take a hard look at climate change?
Senator, yes, indeed. I'm very interested in that idea, and it's certainly something I've been thinking about. The Department of Energy created a look into energy and what the future of energy might bring about 20 years ago. I think it's time to do that again and to look not just at energy and the energy trajectory we're on, but the other issues related to energy, and top among those, climate change.
And I think just on that note, and you have in the past, some time ago, but described how slowly climate change is evolving, and it's so far out in the future, it probably shouldn't command as much attention. And yet I continue, and I think a lot of people are concerned about the acceleration and how soon can we recognize those feedback loops. We're talking about the salinity of the oceans, the massive ice melts and calving of glaciers. Those things have the potential to create a much more rapid rate of change. And I think that's part of ability to get a plan. And as of 2024, they're saying we're at about 1.5 degrees Celsius in increased temperature. If it goes much faster than that, do you think we should have some contingency plans, like, ready, so that we can address that scenario? Even now, we look at the fires in Los Angeles, some of the hurricanes, these extreme weather events, and we're obviously not prepared for them. We don't have an insurance system that works. Each of those suggests or command that we should have a backup systems in place.
No, absolutely, Senator. As you know, I've studied and followed the data and the evolution of climate change for at least 20 years now. It is a global issue. It is a real issue. It's a challenging issue. And the solution to climate change is to evolve our energy system. I've worked on that most all of my career, again, in nuclear and solar and geothermal and new battery storage technology now. And do I wish we could make faster progress? Absolutely. Are there things we can do, investments together through the Department of Energy to accelerate development of new energy technologies that are really the only pathway to address climate change? Absolutely. We should have nothing but American leadership in this area. Energy and climate is a global problem, but America should be the leader. And I think President Trump is firmly aligned with that position as well.
Great. On a more parochial note, obviously the Renewable Energy Laboratory, in a large portion of that work is done in Colorado. You feel that those budgets are properly spent, or do you think they should be reevaluated?
It's too early for me to comment on something like that. I visited the National Renewable Energy Laboratory years ago as a fellow energy guy in Denver. A lot of great work there, a lot of great humans there that are driving innovation and that are working with businesses too. It's not just basic research in the lab. It's very focused on applied research and new technologies. So I'm very keen to engage in a more detailed level with
Right.
what's being on there and how to drive that further and faster.
You know, this, I think it's going to be the first time I've ever gotten 5 questions in with in testimony, so I'm not sure what that says. We spent a lot of work looking at the grid, and as we do begin to build infrastructure that can respond if we need to make more dramatic changes to our energy system, whether it's climate change or whatever other constraints may come along, we've really been stymied, both in terms of the permitting process and finding ways that we can make sure that we protect local communities, make sure that their voice is heard, make sure that we respect the environmental importance of our landscapes, but at the same time realize we've got to move more rapidly in building things like electrical infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit towards electrical infrastructure?
Yes, Senator. I think you've hit, in the energy world, the most pressing problem we have is our electricity grid. And this problem is only going to get worse. I'm very concerned about that. We need to change the gear we've been in the last several years, and we need to get serious about building infrastructure and investment, bringing the cost of electricity prices back down, and keeping our grid stable. I'm deeply concerned about our current trajectory.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Senator Hirono, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to my questions, I just want to note that we did not receive information relating to this nominee until really late yesterday, and it would have been good if we could have followed the process that would have given us more time, which meant that this hearing would not be happening today. So for the nominee, as part of my responsibilities as a member of this, as well as all my other committees, I asked the following 2 initial questions to ascertain the fitness of the nominee for the job. So I ask you, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
I have not.
It is shocking to see the devastation that is caused by the wildfires in Los Angeles, and of course, we're seeing that, it's shocking. In 2023, a wildfire killed 102 people and destroyed the town of Lahaina on Maui. And Hawaiian Electric, which is our major utility company, received a $95 million award from the DOE to help in rebuilding Maui's electric grid and reduce the risk of future wildfires. The state of Hawaii has also received other support and funding from the DOE to proceed with this kind of modernization. Do you acknowledge the need for improvements to our electric grids that will reduce the risk of wildfires and ensure reliable access to power?
Senator, thank you for your question. And boy, I remember watching with horror the fires on Lahaina and the fires today in LA. It is absolute human tragedy. It is devastating. But to answer your question, absolutely, yes. We need to improve our electric grid, both for increased supply, for increased resilience to natural disasters and events.
As we see these kinds of natural disasters, I think municipalities will need help from the DOE. So will you continue allocating funding for grid improvements as authorized by Congress? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not sure it's quite as simple as that, but I think that my short answer would be yes. Of course, I want to work with you and other states to increase grid resilience.
Appreciate that. The DOE is required to ensure that all construction and repair projects funded by the DOE under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act pay prevailing wages. Will you pay prevailing wages as required under the infrastructure law that I just mentioned?
Senator, if I have the privilege to be confirmed, I will follow the laws and statutes of the United States.
And that would mean paying prevailing wages on these kinds of projects. The Washington Post reported that in April 2024, Donald Trump told a group of about 24 oil executives at Mar-a-Lago that they should raise $1 billion for his campaign, which would be a deal given his commitment to reversing environmental regulations, expanding oil and gas leasing on federal land, and approval of natural gas exports. Did you attend that meeting at Mar-a-Lago?
I was at a dinner with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago in April, quite a bit different than what you just described, but yes, I was at a dinner.
Well, it was reported that he talked about a $1 billion. So do you think that it was appropriate for the president to even put forth the possibility of such a deal?
I was at the dinner, and the president put forward no such deal.
That's not what was reported. As Secretary of Energy, you will have oversight over a lot of contracts, grants, and loan guarantees. Are you prepared to engage in vigorous oversight of the DOE's funding, even if President Trump pressures you to approve sweetheart deals to one of his favorite businesses? Will you be objective, and should you be confirmed?
I have followed rigorous and ethical business practices my whole life, Senator, and will continue to do exactly that at the Department of Energy if I have the privilege of being confirmed.
I only have a little bit of time, but I do want to get to this. If you are confirmed, your obligation will be to the American people, not to the shareholders or board members for an oil and gas company. Would you allow all exports of natural gas to China and anywhere else around the world, regardless of whether the exports would increase heating and power bills for the American people?
Senator, I'd love to have more time to talk about natural gas exports. The brief history of them is as we've grown our natural gas exports, our price of natural gas has gone down because the industry, natural gas production industry, has
So
benefited
you're telling
from
me
scale.
that you would, I'm asking whether you would take into consideration what the impact for the cost of energy in America would be if you allow export of these oil and gas. So you would keep that uppermost in mind, right? With what the impact of these kinds of exports would be to the cost of energy to our American people.
Absolutely, Senator. I share
Thank
your
you.
concern there.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris,
I think you have good reason to be concerned with how monies have been deployed outside of the Loan Program Office and for other assistance as well, and we'll come back to that, but I think your concern is well placed.
Vice Chair Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wright, despite your claims to the contrary, more than 3,500 employees have taken the deferred resignation offer. That's about 20% of your staff. And we do know that you fired several hundred probationary employees as well. That has meant some offices are now gutted. There's nobody there. Others are in turmoil. I'll give you an example. The Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, which manages $20 billion in grants from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, lost more than 77% of its staff. It is going to be nearly impossible for that office to accomplish its basic functions, let alone oversee any massive and complex energy construction projects. And as I mentioned, your firings have been really arbitrary, even firing some of our grid operators and linemen at the Bonneville Power Administration, which are not paid for by taxpayer dollars. I know you scrambled to get those people back, and several weeks ago you said no more firings will occur at Bonneville. These positions, really, they're absolutely critical to the reliability of the grid in Washington State and the Pacific Northwest. Will you commit today to exempting BPA from your hiring freeze so they can bring back on staff mission-critical staff and keep the Northwest grid running?
We're very concerned about the power marketing agencies. They're critical to our country, Bonneville being one of them. We've been careful that their operations have not been disrupted. They were short-staffed when I arrived in this chair, and we will continue to treat them as the critical assets they are. Again, headcount is one input. It's an important input, but it's not the only input in running a successful business or a successful agency. And again, you brought up people that have provisionally elected to do a deferred resignation program. Many of them still have the option to decide whether they really are staying, whether they really are leaving. They are in transition. We are engaged with them. They're not fired. They're not gone from the Department of Energy yet.
There are a lot of folks still on the payroll at the expense of the taxpayer. We are told that over $70 million worth, they are on the administrative leave now. They're at home. They're not working. They're not processing anything. They're not doing any work. And as a result, offices across the department are not able to function because those people aren't there, even though taxpayers are still saying, telling them to. But on BPA, just in terms of that, I do look forward to DOE hiring back sufficient staff. We've got to cover these critical responsibilities. Let me turn to the budget. President Trump's skinny budget really doubles down on the cuts that DOGE has made to the department. You propose cutting $2.5 billion from the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, 74% of the overall budget. That eliminates programs that reduce energy prices for businesses, for families. And on the one hand, you and the president say that you support U.S. dominance in energy, emerging technologies, but then on the other hand, you are proposing cutting over $1 billion in funding to the Office of Science. That really undermines critical research programs for AI, for fusion, for quantum computing, for nuclear energy, and critical minerals. Now, typically a new administration crafts a budget request that actually reflects their priorities. You talk a lot, I know, about lowering costs for consumers and creating this next Manhattan Project for AI, but it seems that this budget request includes across-the-board cuts to the very programs that would help you achieve those stated goals. So I want to get this straight. You are asking Congress to cut the budget for the Office of Science by more than $1 billion. That will help advance AI research and quantum computing?
It won't inhibit them at all. In fact, I do think on the margin it will help. Because, of course, all the things you listed, fusion, quantum computing, basic, fundamental advanced basic science, none of those things will be cut. The problem is the labs have drifted into things that are not fundamental basic science, that are political science. And that's just not the missions of the labs.
Do you have examples of those that you'd like to share with us?
We have a crazy range of things on climate change. There is science around climate change that I write about and have studied for 2 decades. There's real science there, but it's become a political game more than a real science game. That's not the business of the national labs, and of course we're going to shrink that activity. We're going to be smarter and more efficient, but none of the top priorities you mentioned are going to be touched at all.
Well, you talk about the importance.
In fact, they're going to be enhanced.
Okay, you talk about the importance of nuclear power and small modular reactors. Just yesterday, you said you were in favor of every incentive we can get from the federal government to restart this industry. Yet in your budget that you're proposing, you cut the Office of Nuclear Energy by $408 million. How are investors and companies supposed to have confidence in partnering with you when what you say and what your budget says are 2 different things?
Each individual line item does not indicate a policy. I think the nuclear industry is quite enthusiastic and quite confident they're going to have the best environment ever for commercial nuclear power under this administration, under my leadership of the DOE. What we're doing is mobilizing tens of billions of dollars of private capital using government.
Well, the private capital is counting on us to make that investment. Otherwise, we see them pull out. We've actually seen companies in the country now pulling out of projects because of the chaos in your department. As a businessman, you said that you should know more than anyone the importance of certainty. And when they see the chaos and they see them pulling back, then they're not going to invest their private money either.
If you can connect me with anyone in the nuclear space or fusion or any of the things you listed that's pulling back, I'd love to jump on the phone with them because I haven't met one. Not one. In fact, I felt exactly the opposite. The most efficient tool that the Department of Energy has to help the nuclear industry is the Loan Program Office. Get high-quality equity money in front and bring government debt on these first few-of-a-kind reactors behind them. That's the way to get it done. It's not direct grant dollars. It's Loan Program Office dollars.
The chairman is going to pull my mic in a second, and I do want to ask you a really critical question quickly. We're having a budget hearing today. We have not seen your full budget request. We need that in front of us. It is required. It is critical information. When are we going to see your full budget request?
I'm working with OMB right now to get that out as soon as we can. I understand your urgency.
Thank you.
Senator Barkley.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I understand right, you said you have not met a single nuclear company that is, hold on a minute. Though I have all those over 60 sometimes have a little technical problem, that is talking about the importance of public funding. Is that right?
Wait, say it again, sorry, Senator
That
Merkley.
you said you have not met a single nuclear company that is talking about the importance of public funding?
No, but I think I may have been unclear, but what I responded to was I don't know of any nuclear company that said to me or anyone in our department, hey, you're pulling back, we're less likely to invest. I've been talking to everyone who will listen and everyone who visits about how we can work with nuclear companies to get things going, to help their project in all different avenues. Okay. In fact, I think we've been called the most constructive administration with the nuclear industry ever.
Yeah. So I just wanted, if that had been your statement, it seemed out of sync with the fact that just this month, the state of the nuclear energy industry was one of the platforms that was hyper-focused on federal policies and programs that expand nuclear generation, an event that you had attended. So that does fit then?
I've attended a number of nuclear events. One of them was yesterday or the day before. Is that the event you're talking about?
Well, I was just trying to clarify because I think maybe the way it came out of maybe you had phrased it didn't seem consistent with the record, but I think you've clarified it. Thank you. So, because I know, for example, one company that was founded in Oregon has really advocated for public funding for the SMR, the NuScale company, and they've got a lot of funding over time to help them get through the nuclear regulatory process. Turning to the challenge in my state, I have a small school district in Mosier, a tiny town in the Columbia Gorge that has a 100-year-old building, and they got a grant to be able to redo their HVAC system. And they were very excited. It was actually a small school often doesn't have a grant writer. They didn't have a grant writer. The parent of one of the students wrote the grant, so for them to be one of only 24 schools that got this was like a whopping big deal of celebration. You can imagine the problems with a 100-year-old school, asbestos and so on and so forth. And so then with the change of administration, they were first told that the funds were frozen, and then they were told they're not frozen, but they then couldn't reach a point of contact on how to proceed. And I know you've let go a lot of staff, but so there was no way to, like, how do we go forward? And then they proceeded to hear that, okay, they did reach a contact, and they were told that a final decision hasn't been made yet. And then they were told that they have to get DOE to approve their contractors. And so it's like one step to another of just a complete bureaucratic nightmare over the last 3 months. And can you have your team get these contractors approved and let this school get their project done?
Senator, absolutely. Well, we will check into that right away. You know, we're here to serve the communities and serve the businesses of the country. So I'm not familiar with this story, but if you've marked, hopefully one of my staff has written down the name of the school, and we'll dive onto it.
And we'll get you a whole page on it.
Thank you.
Because the contractor was ready to go. The school that didn't have much money has already done upfront costs, are just hanging out there. It's a mess. And one of your staff members can hopefully, like, okay, done. You've got a responsible contractor. You're free to go for it. A second, in Frontier, Oregon, which is the term we use for even more rural than rural, we have a grant school district. It's a school district that includes John Day, a town that just lost its lumber mill, one that Senator Wyden and I had strived for years and years to keep open through a special agreement for the delivery of logs. Unfortunately, the owner wants to retire. They're tied up trying to figure out the transition. But here's the school district, and it is also stuck in kind of a crazy space. So without taking up your time with all the details, Grant County School District, the school district, can we get someone on your team to work with them to clear this up and let them, it's also an HVAC issue.
Yes, Senator, thanks for raising that. Thanks for raising that. Sorry for their experiences.
So I wanted to turn to Bonneville Power Authority. Bonneville controls dozens of dams, huge amount of electricity. They have to integrate wind energy, solar energy. Meanwhile, on the Columbia River, they got the challenge of enough water for the barges to take the wheat to market. They got a challenge of the salmon. I mean, it's one of the most complicated. Am I past 5 minutes already?
No, but that's okay.
Can you give
Everybody
me
else is
another
going
moment?
over. You go ahead and go over too.
All right, thank you. So they had a bunch of people fired who were probationary, and we said, oh man, this is such a complicated area, and they need these employees, and some of them, I think 80 were rehired, but we haven't gotten exact numbers. But then we had lost 200 in the first buyout. Another 160 have taken the second buyout. Maybe that you haven't approved those yet. Here's the thing. This is such a complicated system. We were really stunned by this whole initial firings and the first buyout, because these are really experienced people doing really complicated systems. And so was there careful analysis beforehand of the challenges they would face with the strategy of the buyouts?
With the buyouts, we have a clause that we need to approve them, and I think we've tried not to approve any in the power marketing administrations because they were shorthanded when we arrived this administration in. So they've been voluntary programs. We have not. They should not have been even extended the offer. They were probably extended the offer the second go round, but the hope is not to lose more people from there.
Well, I was surprised in the hearing last week with Dan Newhouse that your response was you had just recently heard about their shortage. And this is such a complicated system. I encourage any strategies of buyouts or firings to do the analysis up front, especially when so many experienced people are needed to keep the grid functioning and the water level right and the salmon rules followed and et cetera. In such a system.
The dams are critical. Bonneville is critical. I agree, Senator.
Thank you. And by the way, they're still under a federal hiring freeze, which is handicapping their ability to fill in the expertise that they need to replace the people who took the first buyout.
We will look into that.
Thank you.
We will look into that.
Senator Murray, do you have anything else?
I just have a couple comments. You have heard from my side, one after the other, of contracts that were canceled.
At this time, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Kapler for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just ask one question and allow my colleagues to go on, and I'll come back in the second round. Mr. Secretary, our Constitution delegates to Congress the responsibility of the power of the purse. During your confirmation hearings, you acknowledged the executive role in this system, and I'm quoting you directly, you, in quotes, you would respond to issues of concern to Congress. And that's what I want to ask you about. It is now May 7th. Last January, February, March, April, May, 5 months ago, we sent a letter to the department, to your attention, to freeze, relative to the department's actions to freeze funding to vital energy programs. We followed up with a letter to you the next month in February on the same topic, freezing funds to vital energy programs. In February, we requested a briefing from you regarding the firing of NNSA workers and other Department of Energy staff. It's serious and it's consequential. And then last month, April, we sent another letter, follow-up letter, regarding setting an arbitrary 15% cap on indirect costs for university research grants, which are going to have significant impact across this country. Mr. Secretary, I have to tell you, and I know you've been busy, but we have not had a single response to any of those requests, despite the commitment that you made to Congress to respond. Can you please explain how you might address this going forward?
You bet. I've received numerous dozens of letters accusing me of things that are reported in headlines, in blog posts and media all over the place, almost all of which are false. everyone who's reached directly out to me, I've jumped on the phone with, I've texted back. I've not responded to the dozens of letters yet because we're in the middle of reorganizing the department. But a few quick summary points I'll hit. We have not frozen funding. We don't have a single unpaid invoice at our department, not one. If we have an ongoing project for an existing commitment and work is being done, we've paid our bills, all of our bills. We are reviewing existing projects. We've canceled 0 so far, much to the frustration of people on the other side as well. There's a huge deployment of United States funds allocated by Congress and administered by the Department of Energy. I take that responsibility deathly serious. Every night, I go to bed worried about that, and I wake up in the morning to make sure that we are being appropriate stewards of American taxpayer funds. And we are reviewing, and I'll walk through later in more detail exactly how we're doing that. But let me say up front, why do we need this careful study right now? You guys are moving too slow. Active projects where work is being done, we've paid our bills. We've never not paid our bills, never. In the last administration, let me give one example because it's indicative of other financial support programs. The Loan Program Office is 15 years old. In its first 15 years, it deployed a little over $40 billion towards energy projects. 15 years, a little over $40 billion. We had an election in November. From the day after that election until Inauguration Day, the Loan Program Office issued $100 billion of loans and loan commitments, 2.5 times what was done in 15 years. They did in 76 days.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for beginning to respond. I'm not asking about the entire loan portfolio. I'm asking why you haven't answered 4 requests from the Congress of the United States in the House here.
I'm here
And by the way, it's a bipartisan request, and it is bicameral.
I could not do the work I'm doing and responded to the dozens of letters I've got. I've had several phone calls. I'm happy to jump on the phone with you at any time. And it's hard to respond to requests where the premise of the questions and the premise of the accusations are simply false.
Well, sir, do you have a congressional staff hired yet?
I do. I have. It's lean and mean, but it's actually a tremendous staff.
Well, we have not, since January, gotten a response to our letters to you. And we're very concerned about the firing of NNSA workers and Department of Energy staff. What percentage fewer staff do you have now than you did in January when you inherited the office?
People in the doors that are on the staff right now, it's low single-digit %. We are working on a restructuring of the department, which will be a more meaningful change in that, but it is in progress and it's almost entirely voluntary.
And how many thousands have left?
Well less than 1,000.
Well, would I have your commitment that you could look back at our initial request and every subsequent request and get back to us by next week?
We will continue to provide updates as things evolve in the department. I've spent a fair amount of time on communications in this, but it's not been my biggest dedication of time. If I was to respond to the dozens of letters I've got, it would be the majority of my time. I'm happy to jump on the phone at any time to talk to you or others about it.
Mr.
And when we
Secretary,
finish
we need
our
a more thorough briefing than that, sir. I'm sort of disappointed in your answer this morning. I think it speaks for itself. Yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member.
And the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New York's 14th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Before I dive into my questions, I just wanted to clarify some of the exchanges that happened recently. First and foremost, there was kind of an insinuation that after confirming that solar and renewable energies receive public subsidy, there was a little bit in the exchange that folks may have insinuated or taken from it that fossil fuels do not receive public subsidy. That's not what you're saying, right? Correct, Mr. Secretary?
Nowhere near of the same magnitude, and there's controversy about how to count them. I would say no meaningful subsidies today for oil and gas in the United States.
Okay, I I think you're right in that there's a disagreement in that. Because I think what most people consider a subsidy is public use, public resources going to an industry or corporation. And in 2022 alone, we're looking at $10 to $52 billion in direct subsidies, anywhere between, again, depending on how you count it, $1.5 to $7 trillion globally in the fossil fuel industry receiving subsidy, in addition to tax breaks, in addition to also public lands. I was the chair of the Energy and Mineral, ranking member of the chair in Energy Mineral Resources Subcommittee on Natural Resource, and public lands alone that we had leased for pennies on the dollar for oil companies to drill on. I think those would be considered subsidies, but there may be a difference of opinion there. Additionally, the other thing that I wanted to clear up as well is this exchange previously on the immigrant workforce for many of the oil fields and the industry. You stated that there's a difference between quote-unquote illegal immigration and legal immigration, but what is your stance on the ending of legal status for immigrants in the United States who are here documented?
The devil's in the details, so I don't know enough about the issue you're raising to give a comment. I'm very passionate about immigration and all that, but I'm not sure exactly the question you're asking.
So there are hundreds of thousands of legally documented immigrants here, many that work in the energy sector that are here under different kinds of authorizations, one being temporary protected status that Mr. VC had raised. And the administration is ending this status that provides a path to work permits, legal work permits, for huge sectors of the workforce in the United States. Are you supportive of ending these work authorizations?
Again, I'm not actively working on immigration policy and all that. I don't think I have a thoughtful response to that.
Understood. I'll get back to my question line. In a February interview with Bloomberg, when asked what oil prices you are targeting as secretary, you stated, lower is better. And I take it you stand by that statement, correct?
Yes, in general, lower is better because there's far more consumers than producers.
Mm-hmm. And even if that means oil company stock prices falling?
I don't think American consumers should worry about the stock prices of oil and gas companies. You do need a healthy sector to actually produce, but that's what a market mechanism does. The cure for high prices is high prices, and the cure for low prices is low prices.
And I think we're in agreement there. Given your statement on aiming for lower oil prices, what are your stances on the president's tariffs that are increasing costs of production?
There's lots of impacts, and there's lots of things that impact the cost of production. Most of what the president is doing is going to meaningfully lower the cost of production. But his agenda to try to reshore heavy industry manufacturing in the United States, I think it's good for the country in the long run.
Thank you. I'd like to reclaim my time. There are several, there's an industry-wide consensus here. There has also been a survey in March of oil and gas companies by the Dallas Fed, which were littered about complaints around uncertainty. Companies in this survey commented on the rising costs for materials like steel, which was subject to a 25% tariff at the time and is now subject to a 50% tariff as of June 4th. Steel is obviously a very important input in oil and gas production and energy production writ large. Mr. Chair, I would like to seek unanimous consent to enter these complaints into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Secretary Wright, how does the president's tariffs plan and policy, particularly around steel, align with lowering costs for reducing uncertainty?
Well, if I could interject, the lady's time has expired. If you could answer that in writing, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you.
I'll do that, or we can talk another time.
Great.
Thank you. The lady's time has expired, and the chair